Hello and welcome to another episode of Threads of Conversation, the show where I get my guests to choose 8 items of clothing to represent different moments in their life and career. Today my guest is London-based American designer Conner Ives, whose unique take on modern Americana has seen him become one of the industry's most exciting names. Conner began his brand while studying at Central St Martin's in London. Since then, his clothes have been featured in exhibitions at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and worn by the likes of Rhianna, Lipa, Naomi and Taylor Russell. But his most recognisable piece is arguably the slogan t-shirt he released this year, bearing the words "Protect the Dolls," raising funds and awareness for the trans community. Sales of the t-shirt have since raised over $600,000 for the Trans Lifeline organisation. If you're listening to the audio version of this episode, a reminder that Threads of Conversation is now video too. You can watch it on YouTube or Substack, where you'll see pictures of Conner's chosen items. You can also see these in the accompanying newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. Of course, don't forget to follow Threads of Conversation on Instagram and TikTok, and like and subscribe on Substack, YouTube, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or all of them if you really love the show.
Let's start with your first piece, the piece that reminds you of your childhood. What have you chosen for this category?
So one of the few pieces that I have like a physical copy of, the roundabout kind of childhood piece is represented by my copy of the In America, a Lexicon of Fashion. This is the Met Museum kind of like, I guess, exhibition book that they do with every exhibition. So the cover features, this is look 1 from my graduate collection, The American Dream. And this piece was like it was a felt suit that was made out of like felt military blankets. And then my friend actually like hand felted all of this into the piece. And it was modeled after the Sunset Spot, which was kind of like where I spent a lot of my childhood, like with my friends and stuff. It was kind of like at the end of my parents' road. It's where we would go. It's probably like the first place that like when I learned how to drive, I would like drive there. I'd
Driving off into the sunset.
Exactly. It was my choice location for loitering. So that was really like a lot happened there, especially when you're like a 16-year-old kid stuck in like upstate New York with not much else to do. A lot, I think, in my work is like traced back to that location. Just maybe like the very kind of dream-like representation of America, or at least like my connotation of it. That whole collection specifically was kind of this exploration of the American dream, which is such a like elusive concept that I think also has, you know, kind of benefited from people kind of twisting it and turning the narrative of it to suit themselves ultimately.
But you are one of the creatives really redefining what that means, and we'll get into that a bit more later. But I want to first ask, like, what were you like as a kid? What were the fashion influences in your life in those formative years?
Yeah, it was very obvious that I was like not kind of going into a 9-to-5 in, I don't know, insurance or something like that. I was very, I wouldn't even say like flamboyant. No, I would say flamboyant. I was like flamboyant in the way of like, I knew what I wanted. I knew what I liked. And I also knew what I wanted to do with my time. So I was never sporty. I never really had that going for me. I had very supportive parents. There was like a great art center down the road from where I lived. I think that kind of gave me my early introductions to not fashion, but I think maybe just more so this like creative pursuit, which then became my escape for a lot of my childhood. I was always like making things. I was always kind of doing crafts. Like I really loved any process where I could just make something. I could turn one thing into another thing. And so much of like the foundations of, you know, what I ultimately like built my brand on. I feel like I was doing as a kid. Even I was always like cutting something up or like draping a dress out of blankets ultimately. So I think that always feels very connective to what I do now. And I think even a lot of my modern practice relies on that like naivete that comes with being a kid, kind of discovering these things for the first time. Because I think that it's maybe the you know, the lack of inhibitions that you have as a kid are really beneficial when you get older and you start to build those inhibitions maybe into your practice, almost saying like, well, I can't do this because I have to work this way, or this is, you know, maybe not representative of me or something. It's nice to kind of remind yourself of like a time in your life when your creative practice was really fulfilling because you didn't have like, I don't know,
A balance sheet.
yeah, a balance sheet, a sales team, you know, people kind of like, you know, having to then like make a business out of what you want to do and stuff. So there's a part of me that always like tries to keep that close, you know.
Who were your style icons when you were young? Like, who did you look up to?
The most notable one, and probably like the one that I'm most on the record for like exemplifying, is Cruella de Vil, but more specifically Glenn Close in the live remake. So 101 and 102 Dalmatians, when she plays the fashion designer and she like shows up to work in like a floor grazing like skunk fur coat and stuff. I was obsessed, and I had no problem with kind of like the slaughtering of dog, like the larger plot in there. I was obsessed with the looks, and I thought that she was the most fabulous person in the world, and I just wanted to be her. I had no idea like what a fashion designer was. I had no idea even that it was a job. I think I remember learning, maybe watching that for the first time, asking my mom, someone like that, like, what's a fashion designer? And she was like, oh, well, a fashion designer makes clothes. And I think that was maybe like when it all clicked for me, like, oh, someone gets to do that.
I love that the influence was such a sort of unethical figure in terms of like this woman who skins dogs, and then you start this brand that is like centered around sustainability and like reusing things. So it's fine. I feel like you've kind of you've overcompensated for having a sort of problematic muse.
Yeah, exactly. That's there's like a redialing with it, you know.
And how did you find out about CSM? I always wonder, like, I don't know, you're out there in Bedford in New York. Did your parents tell you about it? Did you read about it online? I don't know. Did you get a mail order catalog? What was that?
No mail order catalog. It was like, I remember, I think I was like 12 or 13 when I kind of figured out that I wanted to go to St. Martin's. I was a style.com fiend. Like, I was really like, that was my first, it was like AOL Messenger and style.com were like my kind of two devoted pursuits.
Dialing up the internet over and over again just like, to get on.
Like you'd call and you'd hear like, yeah, I'm like from a different era, basically. That was, I think, my first introduction. And then falling in love with like McQueen, Galliano, very like traditional kind of story of what a CSM student would tell you. But I kept on reading all these articles about them, and everything kept on pointing back to this Central St. Martin's. So I think I came when I was 16, literally like brought my mom here. Was so thrilled by the idea as well that like in the UK you can drink with a legal guardian at 16 or something.
I love it. So research was a big part of your practice from day one, not only researching colleges, but also researching exactly. So that leads us nicely on to the piece that reminds you of your career. So what have you chosen for this category?
So for this category, I chose a photo that was taken in the prep to our Autumn 24 show, which was last year. The photo was taken basically in the like fittings that you have leading up to the show. This is always what I describe as like my favorite time of year, because it just feels like 2 weeks of like extended play dates with all of my favorite people in the world. And I get to see like my stylist, Vanessa Reed, the creative team that also helps realize the shows, which is like, I'd be nothing without these people. It's just nice. And then, I mean, not to mention all of your girlfriends as well that walk your shows. So in the photo, Hunter Pfeiffer is being fit for it's kind of one of my favorite looks from the show as well. It's like a little kind of like cut off ball gown with like flared gray trousers. There's something like magical specifically about that photo because I think it really shows a very authentic depiction of something that almost feels like it was staged. You know, it's like, I think this is almost what people imagine me doing day in and day out, you know, like surrounded by a team of 20 people. We're all like, you know, standing in front of these like poly boards, you know, bringing this vision to life. Whereas that's probably like 1% of my job. Ultimately, it's the best 1%. That for me encapsulates the career because I think that's the peak of it. That's what you do it for. There's nothing more magical than staging a runway show. I always feel like a show is kind of like an out-of-body experience, and this happens every time we do a show where something happens maybe like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes before the girls kind of start like first entrances and stuff, where I almost like, you know, a part of me kind of leaves my body and is kind of floating over the whole thing, kind of watching it, almost in this feeling of like, it's too much to wrap your head around of like, this is something for me, that it almost becomes this feeling of like, oh, good for him, you know, like that you can't really relate to like the magic of it, which is so special, you know.
Are you able to enjoy it in the moment, or do you feel like anxious until it's done?
I've always enjoyed it in the moment. I've definitely always been equally as anxious, but the beauty of it is with everyone that we do, we get like that much better at it. You kind of go through quite like inhumane levels of exhaustion to like put on a show and stuff.
Can you talk a bit about that lead up to it? Like, what is that? Because I think people just think, oh, you design the clothes and then they're made and then you do a show. Like, what is it actually like in those weeks leading up to it?
That is kind of pretty much it. Like, you're not wrong. You know, you do have to design the clothes, then make them, and then put on the show.
But I think the timeline is always what's so crazy because we really don't spend that much time on a show. I mean, I think people would be shocked at almost how much time producing a collection after you've conceptualized it takes. And I'm not talking about like the show itself. I'm talking about like once the orders have come in, you then have to make, I don't know, 500 of this dress or something. And you have to somehow find, you know, 500 vintage football jerseys. You have to find like another jersey that, you know, works with all those disparate pieces. That part takes up so much of your time. The show prep is so much fun because you're just creating whatever you want. And I have kind of gotten to a point where now it's like other people's problems of like all the difficult things. Maybe like when I'm like, oh, I want to make a skirt from this 200-year-old textile. All the questions of like, how are we going to sell this? How are we going to reproduce this or something? Not my problem. You know, let's give that to someone else. There is a vast network of people that kind of work underneath me where it's still a very small core team. But for Autumn 25, our most recent show, I think we showed that on the 23rd of February, something like that. We started that collection January 1st.
January 1st. Party's over. Let's go back to work.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like basically what happens is like because of the timeline you spend with everything else that's going on in the year, there's so much that happens like almost at the end of the calendar year that you're trying to finish up because you know that you have the show coming up. So you're like, we have to get all the hard parts out of the way. And then we just hit like, you know, the ground running. Spend a lot of time just kind of like making things quite poorly just to get the idea of them, get them on a person, kind of photograph it. And then from there, it kind of, you know, you're just kind of refining that image with every step of the process. I think a lot of it happens in like the last kind of week or so, you know. I think a lot of the times like finals we won't even get until like, I don't know, 10 days before the show. And then it just becomes like, okay, how do we like put together this puzzle piece of a collection? But oh my god, it's like the best thing in the world. It's like there's no drug, there's nothing that's like better than that. It's so great.
So speaking of a high, let's move to the piece that reminds you of a high. What have you chosen for this category?
So for the career high, I chose this is an image from the 2024 costume exhibit. It was Sleeping Beauties, Awakening Fashion. So the Met every year puts on a costume exhibit. It will usually be centered or based around a theme. that year, it was based on almost going into their archive and putting pieces on display that were kind of a representation of, pieces they'd obtained over the last few years. Andrew Bolton is a genius.
Yeah, so take us back. Like, how did that happen?
So
When did you get the call from the Met or from Andrew Bolton, who's the curator of every year's Met Gala exhibition?
So I think on my birthday, I got an email from addressed from the Costume Institute of the Met, basically being like, hey, we're interested in potentially loaning one of these pieces from your graduate collection. I think I sent it to my PR at the time, almost being like, this is a joke, right? I didn't believe it. I was kind of shaking as well. And I think she followed up with them and she was like, this is very real. That year, the exhibition was in America, a lexicon of fashion, which is what the book kind of represents. So they had originally planned to put the bubble dress, the one that was in the 2024 exhibit, in the 2021 exhibit. I think there was something where the dress was too big for the exhibition space that I think in the last week before it, they switched it out for the suit. We donated the dress to them or something where I did not have the physical space to store that dress. So I figured I was just have it, just keep it.
You might find the right moment,
I literally said, I was like, you never know when you're going to need it or something. And
I'll do the work for you.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Exactly.
You can rely on me.
Yeah. And here I was also thinking okay, well, how great is this? Because I'm getting free care and storage for, probably one of the most difficult dresses to store in the history of our brand. It was permanently that shape. There was no
No
pulling
collapsing
it down. There was no pushing it in or anything. For 2 years it just lived in the middle of our studio collecting dust. So, two birds, one stone. I got rid of my, kind of most stressful child ultimately. And she got to go to a great home. And then she got to go in a Met exhibition, without me even knowing. I think I learned about them putting it in the second exhibit the day the press release came out. It was Vogue magazine posted something and we're almost designers in the exhibit will include Stella McCartney, Chanel, and Conner Ives or something, where I was like, what?
So I want to talk about the Met Ball because you have been a number of times and dressed a number of different people. So how many times have you been to the Met Ball?
So I've been personally twice. I've gone up the stairs. I think I've dressed someone 4 times, I think. Lost count. How fast? So the first one and the one that kind of started my career was Adwa, Aboa, and that was in 2017. I was a first year student at CSM at the time. One of the kind of rites of passage that you do at St. Martin's is the white project or the white show. You're given a certain amount of white fabric. You have to make something from it. And it's almost used as this kind of leveling indicator of what can you do with this very kind of humble piece of cloth. I think my mutual friend at the time showed it to Adwa. She then wanted to wear it to the exhibit. Of course, the one that I made for school was a cotton that I was honey. I was like, we're gonna make this in Duchess Sad. I don't know. This is a big stage. And that was almost I would say the 2017 was kind of the last year of the Met kind of being an underground thing,
And then all the bathroom photos started to come out.
Yeah, I think that was the last time that we got the smoking in the bathroom time. It was kind of magical in that way because I think I was 21 at the time, and it was goes back to what I was saying before. I had such a romantic idea of the potential that comes with the fashion industry and just these dream stories that you hear of, and that really felt like my kind of dream story. I think everything after that kind of happened overnight ultimately, where I came back, I was very much still a first year student, but then I was getting requests being when did you graduate? Are you
where are you stopped?
Master's?
Can I come to your store?
No, people being can I come to your studio? And I was looking around my student flat that I shared with 2 other guys being do you mind if the buyer from Brown's just stops by today?
I have 2 questions about that. So the first one is, I feel in the times that you have been to the Met Ball accompanying someone else, what is your, like, are you able to do glam for yourself and like take time to figure out your own outfit? Or is it literally like 5 minutes before they're done and you think, oh shit, I've got to get ready?
I think it's been built into such a thing that you do have to remember, like, okay, I'm walking up a set of stairs, you know? And I think like if you can remember that and just remember as well, like, it's not that deep. I think I am definitely like a person that doesn't finish like minutes before. It's happened before, but I really tried to avoid it because that is like absolute hell to me. And I definitely took some time for myself. I think the last time that we went, 2024, that was like probably the most glamorous time. Because I think even when I did it in 2021, I had no idea what I was doing. And I also didn't have, I mean, Max, my boyfriend, is kind of like my left hand in a lot of things. I think I've come to appreciate it. And I think also it's one of those things that like how many times you're going to do that in your life. I think you have to really like cherish it and try to remember it because you won't remember it, you know, and this has nothing to do with like being sloshed or something like that. It is such a high stakes thing that like your brain kind of records over what you remember.
It's your birth story.
Yeah, exactly. It is truly like entering from the womb.
On that note, I want to know, like, what do you think? You've had so many high points in your career. I mean, early on, like Rhianna spotted you and started wearing your pieces. You worked with her under her fashion line Fenty. You know, you've had so many amazing people wearing your things. The Met Ball. What has been one or two like of the most sort of significant peaks in terms of where you're like, oh, this has really moved my business to a new level, or this is, you know, you wake up and you have 100,000 new followers, or, you know, depending on what your metric of success is.
Yeah, it's such an odd thing as well, because I feel like people define success in such different ways. And I feel like my definitions of success are so like insular. Like there are only things that like I would kind of understand. The t-shirt might have been that, just because it really kind of, and the Protected Dolls t-shirt, I have to provide context as well, because I just refer to it as the t-shirt, but that's like how my head works. I think that was like at a time when I needed maybe fashion providing some kind of possibility that childhood me wanted it to offer. You know, this industry that's gets written off as being so superficial, you know, so kind of like self-serving, all of these things, like, and then, you know, the reality of it, of like, oh no, but it's worse than that, you know. But like, it was nice to have something there that maybe renewed the feelings that I wanted fashion to have when I started doing it. The Protect the Dolls thing, I think, just maybe like reminded me of the ability that you have to build a community. And I think in a way that felt a little bit more authentic than sometimes how community is presented to us in a modern landscape of fashion. I feel like everyone is so desperate for this feeling of like, we've created a community, you know, and like you see a lot of examples of it. If you're like, oh, so this like paid influencer trip is your community? Like how does that work? You know, that it was so nice maybe that with no marketing, no kind of, you know, I mean, it was really just like, I just wanted to wear a t-shirt and kind of wanted to like take my bow in it. It's just those moments that I think you kind of hold your breath for, and gave me more of a reason to feel less guilty about like loving this industry so much.
Well, we're going to talk a bit more about that piece a little bit later. But first, we've got the piece that reminds you of a low. So you were talking a little bit about these feelings of, you know, contrasting those highs that you were discussing around doing the shows and having these sort of peaks in your career. There are also the low moments. So what have you chosen for this category?
So it's like, it's a trick kind of question, I guess. And I was so interested to almost like hear like what other people have given as like a low.
Someone chose something low price and it was Crocs. And then someone else chose, sometimes people choose lows, like a bad item of clothing that they were trying to make work and it just wasn't working. Shout out Celestine Cooney, who said, low price, I chose a pair of Crocs.
That's a really good answer though, because I was trying to like find some like romantic way of being like, it's a low, but it was a high as well.
My worst trait is that I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah, exactly. I chose, this is an image from my like quote unquote autumn 17 collection. the backstory here is that when I was a student, I was still making things kind of outside of my student work. Mainly because I wanted to challenge myself and I wanted to better myself. But what was simultaneously happening with that is I think I was trying to bring it into my tutors. I was trying to show them what I was doing. And it was met with a lot of like animosity. I think maybe because like the model that CSM tries to build is like they really want you to be this like ever hungry, kind of like never really sure of who you are or what you're going to become type of student. And I was never really that. The dress in this image was kind of like one of my like highlights of that time. Like I found like an antique butterfly sequin top, took it apart, like draped it into this gown. I think like cut apart a piano shawl as well for the fringe. So practices that like we're doing to this day. I remember like bringing in this work and like being so excited to show my tutors and stuff, and them just being like, I mean, this is really lame, you know, and like something where it was like I just felt so shattered.
How did you get past that? Because obviously these have become real like sort of pillars of your brand and incredibly successful commercially. So did you kind of lick your wounds and then say, you know, essentially, fuck you guys, I'm going to do it anyway?
Yeah. I mean, it was a very quick kind of like somber moment, but I was like, okay, you know, the byproduct of this is like, I'm not saying this to almost like single out that experience or that I was tortured in any way. I think it made me a better designer ultimately because it made me more capable of defending my point of view also, which I think is, you know, that's what you need to develop.
I want to ask you, like, who are some mentors or figures that have given you really good advice, maybe like outside of, not necessarily outside of the fashion industry, but outside of traditional like tutors or, you know, other designers or...
I feel like this is such a like kind of boring answer, but my parents were really like huge inspirations to me. My mom grew up in the Bronx. She had 4 sisters. My grandpa was a New York City firefighter. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom, and she put herself through dental school. She went to like 8 or 12 years of school outside of college. It was mind-numbing to me that, you know, you were speaking to this person that almost was like, I saw what I wanted to do with my life and I did it, you know, and there was never any kind of like qualms with it or any kind of like frustrations presented with it. And I mean, I was very much raised with this idea of almost like, if you want something bad enough, like you can go get it. And I found that so inspiring. And my dad, in another equal measure, I mean, my dad is a Presbyterian minister, which is kind of always crazy when people hear that, because I don't know, I feel like maybe there's this kind of depiction of what that represents, but was just raised with like so much humanity. Someone literally told the story where my dad had shown up, I think, to a church service like barefoot, and someone asked him almost like, well, where are your shoes? And he was like, oh, well, I saw someone on the street that needed shoes, so I just gave him my shoes. And it was almost like, I've almost had this feeling for like most of my life of like, you're never gonna fulfill that, like you're never gonna be that, like, you know,
calling Jimmy Choo like, let's do a collab, like I need to make some shoes, my father's legacy.
Yeah, so I took that and I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a fashion designer. I think it was just like a perfect balance of like, you know, drive and dedication, but then also this kind of really like humanist, like seeing the bigger picture, I guess, with life. And I always try to do that. I always try to kind of think of like what my parents would do in that setting. And they are really, I mean, and they gave me this life as well. I know that that's like so cliche to say, but I really wouldn't be here.
Shout out Connor's parents.
Shout out.
If you're watching.
Hi. I'm sure they will as well. They're really like, they're fangirls.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I'm sure you will get a new subscriber from my mom.
I love it. I love it. Let's move on to your next piece. So you chatted about this a bit before. So this is the piece that makes you feel a part of something. And I think you've got it here with you.
Yes.
If you want to show.
Let me grab it. This is the OG as well.
This is the one. This is the one that you're wearing.
Doesn't even have a label on it. We were like using it even as like a sample for a while because we didn't have kind of like the stock run yet from the bulk production of it. we might have to like put this away now. It's probably like the most valuable thing that we have.
Calling the Met again. Like, hey guys, I did your favor last time. I have a little something more. Always looking out for you.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like, I mean, even now we were like, do we like donate this to someone? But it's probably like, I mean, we need our own archive as well here. You know, very poor management of the archive ultimately on our end. This is the Protect the Dolls t-shirt. This is probably like what I definitely have the most pride for, because I think it was almost the most surprising outcome of anything like that. I feel like a lot of my career had almost been like designed specifically around this idea of like, I didn't want to just do a graphic t-shirt because I saw that almost as like a cop-out. It's kind of notes on almost like the t-shirt economy. I think like I went through such great lengths to almost ensure that like the production of a t-shirt on our end at least would be as complicated as possible for like everyone's dismay.
Yeah.
To give the backstory of this, I mean, just every headline, one after another, just felt more and more dismal and kind of like end of days. And it's not the first time, I guess, that we found ourselves here, but there was such a like apathy that came with it, or this feeling of apathy, you know, not something where I wanted to be apathetic to it, but I just remember feeling really trapped and really like frustrated with almost kind of wondering, like, as a fashion designer, what am I able to do here? And it kind of gave me a whole new take, I guess, on the power of this job, because it really made so much possible in such a short amount of time. The t-shirt was literally dreamed up even like probably like 1 a.m. the night before the show. Like the story itself almost sounds like we made it up, because it really was just one of those things where like even as I was going to bed, like we were taking like a 15-minute nap before the show. And it goes back to maybe even just like those pressures that I feel, you know, working in fashion, having such a like humanitarian kind of father, you know, I really always was kind of like, well, how do we do this without it feeling ingenuine? I think a lot of what I struggle with maybe in fashion is that
It's like performative activism, essentially.
yeah. And I think there's a lot maybe that comes with a creative director where it ultimately will feel very self-serving, you know, and like, and you're maybe benefiting. Yes, you're donating like proceeds to charity, but you're benefiting much more from that press release than the eventual person that will receive that aid. I know that's such a kind of like snide way to look at it, but it maybe speaks to a shortcoming of the industry as well. And I think we all feel that. I think, you know, we all maybe have these feelings every once in a while where it's like, what are we doing? You know, and that was maybe like my moment where that really kind of took effect. So it was just a reminder, I guess, of like, I love what I do so much. And it was really nice to have something that I love to do so much be so like widely appreciated, and just the enthusiasm that came with it as well. I mean, we had no idea what this would kind of turn into, but I think as of yesterday, I can't remember, last time I checked it, we had sold like 14,000 of these t-shirts.
So you've raised almost £1 million.
I think it's over £1 million.
Wow.
So
it's incredible.
Really, like, we could have never imagined that. And it speaks to that feeling of apathy. That feeling of apathy is by design, and they want you to feel that way. So I think it's really nice when you can have those like small slivers of success where you say, well, it's not all, it doesn't repair what they have done, but it is some act of resistance, which is really nice.
I want to ask you about another sort of group, not necessarily a group that you're a part of, but a group or a type of thing that appears a lot in your work.
Absolutely.
So what is it with you and swans?
Oh, great question. Good question.
I saw there's a little swan there as well. Yeah. I feel like the swan is a recurring motif in your work.
It is, but I love, like, it's kind of the part of me that's like obsessed with pop stars as well. Like, I don't know if you've been following, like, I'm not like a Swiftie or anything, but I'm like really, I'm in the Beehive. I'm really like always following like the
the fans will come up with the craziest theories of like Beyonce is like staging basically like a 3-part movie that she's slowly releasing through her tours, and like it's gonna be this cowboys versus aliens kind of epic. And like I'm so along for the ride, because like whether or not it's true, I'm sure like by design on her end, she's like, yeah, like let them go a little crazy.
Yeah.
Like let them like be questioning like what I'm doing here. I love that. I don't know if this is ultimately related, but I love these kind of foils that reappear in people's practices. I love designers that can reference themselves as well. That's why I'm like such a Mucha girl. Like I really love just her ability to kind of
I feel like she's testing and rewarding those of us that were on style.com age 14 with the dial-up internet.
Yeah, I've seen that print before.
Exactly. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, exactly. And I love those things where sometimes she won't even really kind of like, pay it much attention. But I mean, I think they even did that with like I think it was the last show or something, where all the shoes were kind of previous shoes that they had done. I love things like that, because I think it speaks to maybe also the issues that I have with fashion being so fast. I a lot of the times think a good idea can serve, a purpose for so much longer than we give it credit. I think the 6-month kind of collection cycle is insane, personally. I mean, we're still talking about that Margiela couture collection, like it's not. And I do really think like a designer should be given the option of almost like, I just want to do something like once every like 2 to 3 years, and like almost see if like something better comes of that. Because I do really think that there's kind of a potential there. So the swan thing was like, that was my first year white project. I did all this research into American debutante balls, and I was obsessed with this idea of almost like the social swan, like the swan almost being a foil for like a woman's introduction to society. This kind of like elusive, beautiful creature that, could not be contained. And it was something that like over the years I kind of came back to again and again. In the first version that I did of it, I basically cut these kind of like I drawn these swans and then I cut it almost out of the cross grain of the fabric. So on Adawa's tailcoat, the swans would almost pick up the light at different angles than the main body of it did. So it kind of appeared the same way that like a swan will, like, or a bird, where it kind of like the refractions in the light are what make it so beautiful, but kind of picks up different values of light at different angles. Kind of fell in love with that process. And then time and time and again, I just kind of kept coming back to it. It felt like something that almost was my kind of mascot or something. Leading up to, I think even in the graduate collection, I did another coat that was kind of an ode to Carolyn Pissac Kennedy. It was like another kind of version to me of that like social swan. Look at how up in arms people are about like the Ryan Murphy stuff.
I know.
So
everyone like wants to protect their guardian angel,
exactly,
the patron saint of all mood boards.
Yeah, no, and honestly, like, I mean, give her a break. Like the poor girl, like probably just wants to be like left to rest in peace. I mean, like, I'm not defending the costume work; it's terrible, but I am also convinced that like it's done by design. So we're talking.
I love how much of a conspiracy theorist around pop culture you are. Like, you're like creating your own conspiracies with the swans. Meanwhile, like tapping into the Beyonce conspiracies and then fostering these new CBK worlds.
Yeah. And it all, I mean, the culmination of the Swans thing was Autumn 24, which was the first show that we did outside of the BFC. When you're like a part of New Gen, gives you a space, so you don't have to like go and find a space. We kind of knew that we were getting out of that, and we developed like a conversation with the Savoy, and it did really feel like kind of the childhood me would be like beside themselves, like being in the presence of that show was insane, and like
you're like, who did this?
No, they
I did this,
floating above, like being like, wow, good for him, like that was so great. And the only thing I think that I could kind of do, I always call like the girls that wear my stuff like the swans, and it was kind of like a play on that like social swan thing.
So what is the piece that reminds you of a great party?
So I chose I think I said this in my briefing, but I don't have a photo from the actual party, which shows you what a great party it was. I chose a photo from, I think this was like the night before we delivered it or something. I made my best friend Tish Weinstock's wedding dress. She got married, I think, in 2022 to my other really good friend, Tom Guinness. They got married in a castle. It was like absolute insanity. I did not fare as well as Tish did to make it through that weekend. I don't know how she does it. And I think she wore my dress on the Sunday, which was kind of supposed to be like the like morning after brunch or something. There was not a morning after for me. I was so beside myself. I could not leave my motel room. I was truly like inconsolable. And like I was debating like an exorcism. I was like, I have to be like possessed right now. That was really a fabulous job. It was such a representation of maybe my work and what I'd kind of curated to that point. We found this like piano shawl that was falling apart. It was like hand embroidered onto a silk habitai. The whole thing was kind of done custom to her. That's everything that I love about what I do. And then being able to do it with someone that's so kind of willing, as Tish is, that really kind of cemented for me like what I look for. I guess in like, I mean, overused, but like muse as well. You know, really kind of like, I think everything that I do to this day, a deck, a collection, a custom piece, she's the first person to see it. And she's also usually the first person to like rip it apart, you know? But that's such a kind of like, I'm really protective of my practice and stuff that I think it's also to show just how comfortable I feel with someone like that. I'm very rarely kind of looking for external, you know, say in what I'm doing, but if it's Tish, I'm like, I'll look for it 10 times over, you know? And if she says she hates something, I'll like do it until she likes it. But yeah, love her.
So your penultimate piece is the piece that makes you feel sexy. So what have you chosen for this?
Piece that made me feel sexy. See, it's all related. I basically just spent an hour talking about the Met, but the Met does make me feel really sexy, I guess. So this is a photo from the 2024 Met. I feel like also to people that are like, oh, this guy is like fucking like all he's talking about is the Met. True, but simultaneously it does really feel like the career highlight. It kind of also goes back to what you were saying of like, do you get any time for yourself? I think that time around I got a lot of time for myself. I remember like my boyfriend and I went out to New York for like the week leading up to it. Felt really low key just because like we were working just with Ivy directly. So Ivy Getty was my date for the gala. And we actually met in London in like 2017. It was like another thing where this is the beauty of London, that you meet a lot of people that you like kind of meet the first time around and you're like, oh, what a funny person to meet. And then like it's all interconnected years down the line, where I feel like so many people that have kind of, you know, done huge things for me, or we've done huge things together in my career, I almost met when I was like a kid or something. That was really just like, I kind of framed it as like as much as I did feel like sexy in the moment, like I never feel sexier than like putting on a tuxedo, especially like, you know, a tailcoat, like white tie. Like I love like the pomp and circumstance of getting dressed up. I think that that's something that we've lost in the 21st century. Like there's a part of me that really like lusts after those kind of more regular events that you'd get like dolled up for. And I try to kind of do that as much as I can. If you send me an invite for something that doesn't have a dress code on it, I will be wearing a tuxedo. And everyone's always like, oh, well, aren't you like embarrassed to be like too dressed up? I'm like, no, like why? Like, are you? Like, I don't get that. Like, I don't know. I'd love to be more dressed up than like the other people in the room. And I think that that kind of goes in line with almost like, I felt really sexy in the moment, but I think also like success is really sexy. And like that, I like just the feeling of kind of like owning it and being in the moment, and also kind of being able to kind of like stand up for what you've done. I've always really been like kind of like head down, like work kind of person. But I feel like that dedication has kind of led to things like this, where you can kind of take your head up and kind of look around and be like, okay, I got it. I made it here, you know? So it's nice to like look back on the photo and be like, okay, good hair day, you know?
Great hair day.
Yeah.
So we're at the final piece.
Okay.
This is the one that got away. What have you chosen?
This is a tough one. This was really like, this is another one that I wanted to know, like what other people have done for, like what.
So Brenda # chose a Margiela jacket that she left on a train, but then someone found and she managed to get it back. The one that got away. A lot of it is like vintage that people didn't buy. I think that's the thing. Everyone who loves fashion is haunted by the pieces they didn't buy.
Yeah. This feels like a therapy session as well, because what I've established here is that like any traumatic experience, like me not getting like a vintage piece that I want, I'll block it out. Like I do not commit it.
We're opening the vault.
Yeah, exactly. So this is probably like a recent trauma, which is why I can still imagine it. But there's nothing worse than losing a press sample. Especially when the press samples are all made from vintage. So like, you know, it's one thing like you lose a black slip, you could make another black silk slip or something. When you make them from vintage t-shirts that are like one of ones and, you know, have like the best like kind of graphic or logo on it that you've ever seen. This is one of them. We lost the Spring 24 cardiac rehab dress. We even tried to kind of like see if we could find another t-shirt to try to recreate it or something, or even like lift the graphics from it. I'm such a person that like I can't believe something that I know is false. So even the idea of like reprinting that vintage t-shirt would be impossible. But yeah, I mean, we had someone that lost a sample, and that like becomes really traumatic to me. Shout out. If you want.
Redacted.
Yeah, and I wish, like, there's a part of me that really wishes I could put more distance between me and the things, because I think it's ultimately like an unhealthy relationship to have. But I think it also speaks to maybe my like favorite part about fashion. The way as humans we do kind of project these relationships onto these things that we love that feels so superficial. But my favorite thing to do is like asking a person about like, tell me about like, you know, your most favorite piece of clothing ever, and then watching the way like their face lights up and stuff. It's
welcome to my whole podcast.
Yeah, no, exactly. Here's an idea.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I love that one.
There's something about that I feel like we're almost trained to feel so ashamed of those materialistic relationships when it feels like the most human kind of relationship there is. Outside of like a relationship or something. I feel like almost like a relationship to an object is so much more healthy, because, you know, you're not having to then onboard that other person's kind of like I don't know, you know, baggage and like terrible kind of coping mechanisms and stuff into like your own output, you know? If you just love like a t-shirt, you can project onto that t-shirt that it loves you back, you know? Because it's your item. It can be whatever you want.
Forget falling in love with AI. Fall in love with Conner Ives t-shirts instead.
There you go, girls. Yeah. No, and I think that's really it for me. I think like it is the one that got away. I'm hoping we get it back, but they were almost like, send us an invoice for it, but I think it's gone.
But like, this is an invoice for priceless amount.
Yeah, exactly. This is the invoice for the like emotional trauma that you've like imparted on me.
Well, the item will be forever memorialized in this episode of Threads of Conversation.
No.
Conner, thank you so much for being such an amazing guest.
Thank you so much.
And taking us through your Threads of Conversation.
Of course, it was an honor.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Threads of Conversation. A reminder that you can find pictures of Conner's items in the accompanying newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed the episode, then don't forget to hit the heart button and subscribe for more Threads of Conversation.